So you've done the viewing, now what? This is where most investors get stuck. They don't know how to correctly analyze a deal to make sure it's a great investment. In this video, I'm going to show you my exact process that you can implement to make sure you're securing great investment property. So let's jump in and review the initial figures. Well, first of all, what information do we need? So we're going to jump on Rightmove. It's the largest property portal in the UK right now. And we're going to narrow our search. So this is going to be your area, type of property, how many rooms, your price range. Find your subject property. And then to find the actual price, remember there is a difference between what it's advertised at and what the market value is. If an estate agent asks for 150,000 or offers in excess of 200, it doesn't mean it's worth that. Use it as an indication or a guide, not the final price. So we want to jump on sold prices in the area, recently sold, ideally 6 to 12 months from today. On top of that, look at Land Registry, Zoopla, and similar properties on the market. Get on the phone and talk to some agents in your area. So what we want to do is we want to find out the yield. Well, first of all, what is yield? There's gross and net yield. The one we're going to focus on is gross yield. Net yield is kind of a ridiculous thing because net means after everything. And really yield is like a comparison. So we're going to go for gross yield as a percentage. So here's what yield looks like. So what we're going to get is the annual rent, i.e. the monthly rent times 12, and we're going to divide that by the purchase price. Worth saying this, by the way, people go, yeah, but what about the stamp duty? What about refurbishment? What about X, Y, Z? And it's like, yes, all very valid opinions, but that's not what yield is. Yield is a black and white metric. It is annual rent divided by purchase price, and then if you want it as a percentage, you times it by 100. For example, if I've got a property where the rent is £900, I'm going to times that by 12, and let's say the purchase price of this property is 150,000. And then once we've done that, we want to times that by 100. So therefore, we've got £10,800 divided by the 150,000, which is 0.072 if you do that on your calculator, and we times that by 100, which is 7.2%. So ultimately, it looks as a decimal, you times it in. And what I'm looking for, just so we're aware, in my area, I'm constantly looking for a 7% yield. That's what we're really targeting. Now, it is getting harder to achieve, and it's important to know a yield will change per area. For example, in central London, you're not going to get 7% yield. In the northeast, in a little mining village, your yield might be double digits, for example. Yield is not everything, but it is important. Step 2, check in rental demand. I'm going to give you a nice little hack on this. So first of all, let's jump on the portals, all right? Let's look at the numbers. What are similar properties renting at? The only complexity here is you being honest with yourself. So if you've got a nice enough, decent quality 3-bed terrace house, compare it to that. Don't go, oh, there's this 4-bed that's recently been rented. It's not comparable. So jump on Open Rent, Zoopla, Rightmove, and any other online portal, even Gumtree, just to see what people are actually renting at. And you're trying to find like-for-like comparisons. Now, ideally, you would actually get the ones that are let. And if you click the button on Rightmove, it will say rented subject to, okay? Now, I would look at that. The other thing I like to do is tested demand in the area, and this goes for sold house prices as well. So a nice little tip, so go on Rightmove and search your area. It could be Castleford in Yorkshire. And I go on Castleford, type in my criteria, bedrooms, 2 to 4 bed, etc. And then I'm going to search how many properties are available in the area. Let's say there's 20, for example. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the button that says include let agreed. And then I'm going to see how many there are. So let's say including let agreed, there's 40. Well, what that tells me is 50% of the properties in the area have rented out. Now, really important to know that they're taken down quite quickly because obviously rents, once they're rented, no need to have it up there. but I would strongly recommend looking at that, and anything above 35% shows decent tenant demand in the area. As I said before, check out local letting agents, talk to them, and by the way, ask them, I'm looking at a property in this area, would you feel comfortable managing it? And if it's in a really rough area, they will say no, and they are your best source of information. Now, if you really want to be cheeky, and sometimes I do this, I'll be honest, especially with HMOs, because of the biggest cost and things like that, I want to be 100% on the demand, is I'll do a dummy ad. So I'll post one of my other properties, start it up, show some pictures, and then see how many applicants for those properties come in. And it gives me a really good indicator of the types of people that are going to be attracted to it, the conversations I'm having, and how much demand there is. Next, and in my opinion, the single most important figure, so we'll go back to the iPad here, is capital growth. Now, if you don't know what capital growth is, it's essentially supply and demand. When demand for any product or service is higher than the supply, naturally prices are going to go up over time. So if I've got this property, and let's say it's worth 200,000, and we've got 10 people looking to buy it versus one person looking to buy it, it's fairly obvious it'll probably end up going for more if 10 people are looking to buy it. That's just fairly obvious, right? But what's not as obvious with people is the impact that that has over time. So let's say in one area you've got 2% capital growth, and in another area you've got 5% capital growth, just as an example. Now, let's say in the 2% growth area, it's getting you an 8% yield, and I'll just put YLD there, and in the 5% growth area, you're only getting a 6% yield. Now, what a lot of people would do is go, well, obviously the 8% is better. Obviously not you if you're watching this right now. But actually, the capital growth is what really makes the money, because that £200,000 property adds another £2,000 in the first year in equity, because 2%, and the 5% gets another 10,000 of equity. And then what happens is over time it compounds. So growth is not linear, it's not this long line like that. Instead, it grows like this. Okay, so as we're going forward, it accelerates and we get this compound effect. And in general, if you can find a high demand area and you've got strong capital growth, you will make the most money, because you have to remember, when you're buying buy-to-lets, you're not going to buy it £200,000 cash most of the time. You'll usually put down a 25% deposit, so 50,000, add some extra costs, and then when you've got that growth, that's on the total value of the property, not just your deposit. So you are leveraging somebody else's money, a bank, to accelerate your net wealth. The only other tip around capital growth that I will give, apart from the local demographic, the demand, is how can we predict demand? And a really nice tip here is look on your local council website, because they're going to constantly talk about development plans, funding, what they're doing in the area. And a great example right now is if you go through Leeds, south of Leeds, you've got something called the South Bank development, 350 football pitches, 8,000 jobs, thousands of homes, and that's very obvious that that's going on now. Go back 5 years ago, it really wasn't that obvious, except it was. It just wasn't physically obvious when you look on Google Maps and walk around. But if you went on a council website, you would have seen the plans for years, funding approved, and everything else. What a hack to get ahead of the game. So the other thing's the additional cost. A lot of people do things like they'll go, oh, I'm buying a 100 grand house, therefore it's 25 grand plus a bit of stamp duty, right? It's like, well, no, you need to think you've got your deposit, which most often is 25%. You're going to have stamp duty, which can be 3% upwards dependent on the purchase price. You're going to have your refurbishment, which can be anything from 0 to tens of thousands of pounds, solicitor fees, broker fees, and everything in between. And so it's really important to understand these numbers, because if you don't, you can get your numbers wrong and lose a lot of money. So putting it simply, we've got our purchase price, our refurbishment, and then consulting/property fees attached to the investment. Step 5 is the exit. And it's really important to think of the end, have the end in mind. You might have heard these phrases, you make money when you buy, not when you sell. That's strictly not true. But when you're looking at the exit, you need to know what your primary approach is. For example, I love boring, vanilla buy-to-let properties. That is always my number one exit. But what if I buy it and then the refurb ends up going through the roof, or we pull something out and there's these additional costs? I need to have my scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Really, I like to have 3 scenarios. So whenever I'm looking to invest, I'm always thinking, what if this happens? Exit number 2. What if that happens? Exit number 3. And these could be you're selling it could be you're going to a different strategy, it could be that you know how you're going to maximize the income, or anything in between. So for example, say I was buying it and Labour government gets in and changes stamp duty last minute. Probably not a predictable one, but in hindsight, maybe that would be good. What if you start buying and interest rates start going up? Bank of England put it up 0.5% because inflation's too high. What if the market corrects a little bit, specifically in that area during the legal process? We need to be prepared for all of these things. Now, a lot of that is very unlikely over a 3-month conveyancing period, but it's always good to think ahead. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So then what we want to do is pull it all together. So we've done our analysis on the property in the area, and subjectively our opinion is we love it. We like the area, we think it's going to attract the customer that we want from a buyer or a renter's point of view. Now we want to understand the numbers, and this number is called an ROI or ROCE. So use both of them interchangeably. ROI is return on investment, and the ROCE is going to be the return on capital employed, or return on cash employed, if you like. So how do we calculate this? We've got our annual net profit, so I'll put annual NP, divided by cash in, and this is the total cash, everything that we can think of. So we divide it by that, and then we times by 100. Now, when we're looking at the annual net profit, it might be, for example, and I'm making this up, is £2,000 net comes from the rent. So that's our rent minus our mortgage, maintenance, fees, everything like that coming in. But we might also have £3,000 in capital growth, for example. So yes, it's not cash in our bank, but our net worth has increased from capital growth. So that's £5,000. And let's say we've put in £50,000 on that investment, then that's going to be 5k divided by 50k, which, if you can't work that out, is 10%. And I've used that as a very deliberate answer. And really, we're looking for an absolute minimum combined return, net profit from the rent and capital growth, as 15%. And actually, we conservatively estimate that. And almost every one of our investors over a 5-year period annually receives a 20% return on investment. Not too shabby, right? But of course, these are predictions that become reality, and we want to be as accurate from day one. So make sure we're doing the analysis correct. What demand's going on? Read some bits. Look at local council. What development's going on? What can you get excited by that's going to manipulate these figures in your favor? And of course, what we then need to do is stress test. And in stress testing, what we like to do is, this is not, oh, am I getting an amazing return on this investment if I do this, and this? It's a, does it still make sense as a worst case scenario? So it might be, what if interest rates go up 0.25% during the legal process, which, if it does move, it probably is about that movement. What happens if the market actually goes down 3% over a year? Things like that. And it's not to go, does it still make me loads of money? It's a, can I swallow that? Is that still worth the risk? And almost always the answer is going to be yes, but do your tests. Final tip I'll give you here is, don't manipulate the figures. We massage figures to make it all fit, but the reality is, it's binary. Yes or no. Black or white. It either works as a deal or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, what's the figure that you need it at in order for it to work? And if you can't make it work, pipeline to chat with them in 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or walk away. This is only a small piece of the puzzle. The reality is to stop yourself becoming a motivated buyer, you need an abundance of opportunity. And this is abundance of money and an abundance of direct to vendor leads. And the reason I'm saying this is if you're ready to take action and get to the next level this year, we're actually starting a new intake of our 12-week program. This is the Elite Property Trading Academy, where we're going to show you how to get up to 100K, 6 figures in the next 12 months. And if you want a non-obligation chat with me or the team, find out more details, I've put a link in the description. Click on it, fill it in, and I look forward to having a chat. I hope this has been valuable for you. These are just the basics that we look to cover to give you a deep understanding of how to approach your investments. If you did get value, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, you want to learn more about property investment, business, and so much more, hit the subscribe and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.